The lights laid out clear across the hill, or they could break and slip. They'd slide right down the hill with them. They'd come sideways. They got up, they could raise them up straight. They could put them at different angles, so all the people enjoyed that. And we made a lot of big signs that were operated. Didn't have all the fireworks and things like they have now, so I made a lot of the signs that said howdy, welcome to Steamboat, Olympics, year, Colorado, Steamboat, USA. And they were individually, and they stood about 3 feet high, and they were wrapped burlap around the frames that I made for them. And then they were soaked in diesel fuel, and we'd have a skier torch them, or 2 skiers torch them. And you could read the signs very plainly from a hill clear into town. You could see those. They were up high enough that you could read them very distinctly. They'd last and burn for about, maybe 15 minutes. People got a big kick out of those signs. But as the years progressed, we eliminated those and started using a lot more fireworks and using those designs and multiple colored lights that were very hard to get. One time we lost a lot of them, never were replaced, able to get them. Some of those globes that we had, they come from Japan. The Japanese are very artistic, in their fireworks and their electric lights and those kind of things. Well, we had a lot of those. Happened to be this one particular night, we forgot to pick the box up. We never did recover them. So that limited the last 20 years on doing the show, because you just couldn't get those kind of lamps to replace it. But through the years, we had a lot of them. I know at one time, I think I had over 5,000 electric globes. Because at one time, when I'd come down the hill, or 2 or 3 times there, I think I had at least all around 300 to 400 lights on the hill. Now, I wasn't carrying that many. I was only carrying around 100 lights on my uniform. But these are designs that were out the side, little clusters of lights and set up here and there that make it attractive, look like the hill was lit up, something to keep people on the alert to know what was going to happen next. And that's some of the things that took place for the Lighted Man. There's a lot of other things I can tell you if you want to know about them.
Well, you got to have some funny stories, though, that happened
Okay.
up there. Have you got any of those?
Well, I've got one particular. Kids, they were around Dad, and they seen him catch on fire a time or two coming down the mountain. And I guess they probably just out of this world. They didn't want to get near anything like that or do anything like that. So I coaxed for years after John got up. Of course, they could ski real well after they were 6 years old. But I thought, well, time John's 10, he ought to take a light outfit down at least 50 pounds. And so I couldn't ever do it. So I had 2 suits, or 2 units. And John used part of it, some of that suit from the time he started. And he'd been doing it. This will be 20th year this year. That was retired this year, some of that original suit. But I was getting him to see if I could get him to come down that mountain. So I thought, well, there might be a way that I can work it. I'll make a frame and put that other suit on the mountain. So I did, set that up there. And before I started down, we through the years, we've had what we call false starts. That's to throw the audience off. They see the flares go here, the Lighted Man's over here. So that particular year, they turned that on first. And I thought, well, I wonder why that guy don't move. Been there 2 or 3 minutes, no action. So finally, we set off for false flares, and I started from the opposite side of that thing. Well, they were puzzled. They didn't know what in the world that was. But anyway, getting to the gist of the story, that was what John thought, by golly, maybe he could. He heard so much comment about that other skier and things like that maybe he could do it. So it took me a year or 2 to get him talked into it. And I finally made it, and by golly, he got into it, and he's carried the tradition on. And we did it together for 7 years. One time we were lucky enough to have another brother, Kent. We had 3 on the hill that night. And they'd all comment. They said, well, how do those fellows carry all that weight and ski parallel? I said, well, I don't know. Maybe that's not the way you know how to ski.
Now, do you remember scaring small children and wreaking terror up there on the mountain? Do you have any recollection of that? Little kids just being terrified?
Oh, yeah, they'd be scared to death if you'd happened at first, and especially, I guess, now. And then the crowd come in a little closer, was scattered out and different, and didn't have quite the room in that respect. Of course, they don't have the parking area like they had, but you'd have to make a swoop in past the kids. I thought, sure, that fellow out of space was sure going to get to them. That was all there was to it. And it creates a lot of enthusiasm. The kids, they just roar and scream. I'll tell you, you can hear them clear in town. That was one of the main reasons we did it, was to entertain the young people. And I think the older ones got a kick out of it, too.
John, has he got any other stories that you want him to tell?
That's pretty good.
That was a good one.
Oh, there's a lot of stories you can tell that happened. One time, I remember they didn't used to groom the hill. You skied down over the moguls, and before the season was over, they were big. And when you went down over with 2 or 3 of them, you're about out of sight. That is from the top, looking down. The audience can see up. Well, that particular night, as the hill used to be, was just slicker than all over. Ice, bumpy stuff and everything, and I was doing everything to stay right side up. Went over one of those moguls and spun clear around. And I'll tell you, I did everything in this world to stay up, without going down and stopping. Well, somehow I managed to accidentally stay up. Got down, a lot of them said, well, that was sure a great new routine you put in there. Boy, that's great to have that. I said, that wasn't part of the show. That's something that just accidentally happened, and I managed to stay up. If I'd have fallen, I'd slid all the way down that night with it.
You had to be an awfully good skier on wooden skis with no edges, carrying 100 pounds.
It's a start. Yeah, that was quite a trick, I'll tell you. Yeah, through the years, of course, after the edges come, and that made a big difference. Skis changed, and the equipment helped us a lot. I'll have to admit, I was a strong individual. I had a lot of power. And that I think that got me through, and I took advantage of it. I used it to get down the hill. But
do you have some recollections about some of the other winter carnivals and just skiing in general? Do you have any stories about skiing and Steamboat and growing up here? What was it like?
Oh yeah, what I used to get thrilled a lot was having the jumpers would come a lot. That was the main attraction, the jumping hill. And these skiers had come from all over the United States, and a lot of them migrated from Norway. And I remember they come and they'd really put on a super show over here on the hill. And I remember one time they lined up in groups of 3. And they jumped off over the jump in sections of 3 in 3 different sets. If you don't think that was a beautiful sight to see 3 just off the takeoff, 3 just ready to drop on the hill, 3 down off of the hill. And they did it just like it was precision, like they'd practiced it. I don't think they had, but it just worked beautiful. And I noticed they did that in other places where I went around the country. And it was a chore to get up the hill in those days. The first time I got here, they had stairs that you'd walk up. Little steps, wood steps, were put up all the way up the jumping hill. And they weren't very big. They must have made them for small children or something. Ski boot wouldn't fit in them. They were only about 4-inch steps. And those fill up full of ice, and then you'd kick your way up. And if somebody fell ahead of you, it knocked everybody else. And you'd slide down the hill, end over end. And if you're lucky if you got the top. Most of the jumpers walked up those. But they had this boat tow for years. It was kind of unit around here, and one boat went up the hill, and then one come down. You better get in. If you got into it, and it went straight up practically, you'd better hang on for dear life. That was another contraption. If you happened to fall out of, you'd take another ride to the bottom of the hill. And if your bridge work was loose on the older people, it was shook loose before they got to the top. There's been a lot of great things happen in Steamboat. I'll tell you, the people here have been very enthusiastic. They've been very kind to us, and I've always enjoyed coming. My kids were just, when they were growing up, couldn't wait to get here. That was the highlight of what we did every year, was coming to Steamboat. Although I had a private hill for them at Vernal to ski on, Steamboat was the place. That was it. They went to a lot of other places, but this is the one that the family always wanted to come to.
Now, in those early days, how did you get over to Steamboat in the 20s, in the 1920s? How
Well,
did you get here?
family had a few.
Did you drive?
Oh yeah, we'd drive it with the family. Usually, Daddy usually provided us with pretty good transportation.
What kind of car?
The first one I brought over here, I think, was a Packard. If you remember, Packard car. Drove that over here, and it took all day. There was very little pavement, and if it's a snowstorm or something come, the roads would drift. Well, that's where you stayed. I've seen the time when it maybe take 3 or 4 days to get to Vernal. You were lucky if you got from Steamboat to Craig, and then by golly, maybe you didn't get to Vernal for a long time. That road would shut down below there. So it took quite a while to come. But by 1936, we just a matter of 3 or 4 years there, it made a tremendous difference in the travel, that is, in getting here. So we never had too big of a problem in getting here. But we'd always drive over to here from Vernal through the years.
I was going to say, in the early days, most people just put their cars in the garage in the winter, didn't they? Just
Oh,
put it
yeah.
away.
Well, that was quite a chore when you brought a car up here in the morning. Years ago, you didn't have any antifreeze. And if you brought them to town, and as quick as you got here, you drained it. And if you were lucky to get it in a garage, I remember the Lukens had a garage down, and they were very good to me. They would let me keep the car in there, which would help to get it started. Then you'd fill it back up full of water, and that didn't last very long. If you made 2 or 3 starts during the day, you'd have to keep filling and draining all day long, or cover it up, or park it in the sun. But then you had a lot of trouble. But after the antifreeze, the good Prestone arrived. Well, that made a big difference of how cars were handled in the wintertime. But years ago, I can remember that you'd see these helper trucks or whatever you'd call them. They'd have 2 or 3 batteries and rounds helping people get started, and a can of ether and things like that to get them on. You don't see that too much anymore now. The car starts so much better.
When was the last time you skied as a lighted man?
A lighted man? Well, that was 1978. That year, John and I skied together. And then the next year, in '79, I got everything all ready and happened to have a misfortune of having a heart attack. So that slowed me down to where I couldn't carry the weight anymore, and I had to learn to live with that from then until now. And
Did you still ski?
still ski. Yeah, went out on the hill yesterday, and I think I was the oldest man out there. I don't have very much competition in my age group. I pretty well got that to myself.
Okay. All right, let's check it out. Got a little bit of tape left.
Well, skiing at your age, you probably have. You were saying you have to kind of keep up with your pacemaker, or
That's exactly right, and I don't have to ski too fast to keep up with it, because I used to go backwards on one ski faster than I go forward. I can still go down all the runs, but I have to be limited because it takes energy to go down a steep one, and on a cruiser or out in the easier runs, well, I can get that old man style swing and take it sweet and easy.
And was there party? Did they party a lot in the earlier days of Winter Carnival? I mean, was it a big?
Oh, well, I think they still do, but everybody knew what everybody was doing those days. Had a big dance hall down here in town, and everybody took that in, and we always had a big following from Vernal. Lots of people come up to see the night show and to see all the events at Steamboat, and they still come. We still have a lot of people come. But I remember that they'd have a big banquet for all the skiers and all those that participated. That'd usually be on a Sunday night. And on the Saturday night, everybody'd have their own little parties and get together. I don't know if they did anything any different, that is, for having a good time, and maybe have a few social drinks. There might be a few cowboys that kicked up the town a little, but I never did see anybody up here really get out of line too much. They usually had a good time and were friendly and saw to it you had a good time, and they had a good time, and everybody knew everybody then, and they had those bands that come and play. We used to, when we skied over there, over at Howson. There's several of those springs are open down around there in the depot area. And one of my friends, I don't think he had anything to drink that day. Never did drink very much. But anyway, we got around the edge of that hot thing, and it was about 20 feet circle. And it was about 15 feet down in through the rocks to the steam, to the water. And he said, well, I wonder where that actually comes from. I says, well, I don't think you ought to figure out where it comes from. And no more than said that out of my mouth, and end over end, skis and all, went down in that hole down in there in that hot springs. Well, if you don't think I had a time getting my skis off, trying to crawl down there, and I fell into him, trying to get into him, getting him loose. I think we were in there 30 minutes before we ever got out of that place. Luckily, we didn't get in the water too much, but I'll tell you, I always remember that. And then we'd always go up here to the local swimming pool. We'd always go up there in groups and have a big time.
To the heart.
Right here in town. We'd go there. And that was always a stopping point because that seemed to kind of relax you up a little bit, because in those days you used the energy. If you didn't have good legs, you didn't ski. And I'll mention another one or two. We used to always, Sunday or Saturday, haul rabbit ears into town. That was just an ordinary run for skiing. So I don't remember the gentleman here that had the unit, but he had an old truck. And, you know, in Steamboat in the wintertime, it's not too warm. It seemed like it was always 30 or 40, the coldest mornings. He didn't have any open closure on this thing. We'd get in there and stand up in the back of that, hold on, ride the top of rabbit ears. When you got up there, we were stiff, you couldn't bend. And you could hardly put your skis on. Well, after you'd walked a mile or two to get over the edge to come down through, you just about limbered up a little bit to where you could go. That is, you're getting a little life back into you. So I remember to stay on course, we used to follow the telephone line down. I remember sometimes the snow would blow over the mountain and get so deep that you could get up, use the wires, hold the wires, and go from pole to pole down the mountain. I don't know whether the telephone company approved it or not, but we did that. And we'd go down through there, and all that deep snow, all brand new snow to ski in. And we'd get mad if, or kind of peeved sometimes, somebody got in your track or cut across and threw a little snow in front of you. We wanted that new snow all the time to turn in. So when we'd go, all the people we'd see that day was our group. There used to be a restaurant up about where the timbers are now, and that's where we'd stop and have lunch. And then often, maybe we'd ride to them. But a lot of times we'd ski from there into town, down through the fences and around the back way and somehow. But that was a daily run on skiing in those days. It took all day. We didn't have any equipment. You were out for the day. You didn't have a shelter during the day or place to warm up or those kind of things. If you got in a blizzard, I know many times we come out there in a blizzard, we didn't know where we was headed for Steamboat or Denver. Sometimes we'd come out and everybody'd survive. And we were lucky. Accidents were very few in those days. But I think the reason was the snow was deep, and that saved us in that respect, because most of the skis were bolted on. If you happen to turn a hand, that is, I call those bear traps, and they didn't come off. Boy, they stayed with you. 2 or 3 times in my life, I broke them on both the tip and the tail, and all I had was about a foot of the ski under my feet. They're made out of one piece of wood, and they'd get a hard pressure, well, they'd break. And that was that. Remember one time I broke 2 sets of skis in 2 trips on Halcyon Hill over here. I went up with one pair, come down through those big moguls I told you about previous, turned the handspring, snapped the tip off one of them about 2 feet off, still 6 feet long after that. And I had another pair of skis, and they were still long. I think it was about 7.5 foot skis. They were tall in those days. You couldn't reach them unless you had a 3 foot tape measure or whatever you call it, yardstick. You could just about make the top. So with them off your head. Well, I'll be darned. I had that other pair of skis, and I went back up that thing, and I came down there, and I broke the others in the same place. Well, the weekend skiing was left, so you believe it or not, I skied on one short ski and one long ski. One of them was about 7.5 feet long, and I think the other was about around 6 3/4. So that was my skis for the weekend after having that accident.
You just had to make do. Now, what kind of, in the 20s, you didn't even have bear traps, did you? They were just a leather.
We had leather straps, then First ones I ever had was on a pair of inner tubes. Just an inner tube folded over and put over and the ski was mortised out in the middle. And you shoved that thing through there and then hooked it with whatever you could, with a sewed or fastened it together with anything you had around the place. You didn't have much in those days.
Now, I understand some people back in those early days even skied on barrel staves.
Oh yeah, I've seen several people ski on barrel staves. Yeah, put them together and put that loop through there. No, I didn't get a cable binding till about 1936, and I got the edges about that time. And I remember I was skiing in Salt Lake, and somebody said, "Well, I don't think that guy, he goes too wild. I don't think he ought to have steel edges on his skis."